Hi, I'm Brian. I recently rode my bike across the Minnesota border-to-border touring route, which is an ORV route that's proposed by the DNR. And it was over 625 miles that I rode, and I took 10 days. So I'm going to talk about the gear that I brought, including the bike, the camping gear, the clothing, and my camera gear. To get this started, we'll start with the camera gear because that's probably what most of you want, because most of you know me as a landscape photographer instead of an adventurer. So I have all my camera gear and electronics laid out in front of me, and I'm going to start with the power, and then I'll move to specific camera gear and then how I carried it all. So I brought a Nightcore power bank to power everything up. So this was 10,000 milliamp hours, and I brought a couple of Anker chargers. So this one had they both had the IQ PD parts, and then this one had an additional USB-A output. I like this one a lot because it had the flippy plug thing, but I definitely used both of those plugs. I had multiple cords here, so USB-Cs and USB-A to USB-C. And then an unusual one that I had that I needed to power if I wanted to recharge my headphones. So for the cameras, I brought 2 spare batteries and then a battery in the camera, and then I could also use the camera to recharge with needed. And because I didn't shoot a ton of photos, I didn't need to recharge. So my other electronics included these open run shock headphones. So these just go on around your ear and use the vibration to transmit it through the ear so that you're not, you can hear your surroundings as well as the music or podcasts or whatever you're listening to. I brought a Nightcore lightweight headlamp. I replaced the cord, the strap that came with it, with just some bungee cord, which I like a little bit better. And it was slightly lighter, but I just like wearing it better. Some of the items that I brought for power required a additional USB micro adapter, so I brought that. And I brought a case for multiple memory cards. I didn't actually end up using any of these additional memory cards. I just used the 128 gigabyte card that was in the camera, and that was plenty because I wasn't shooting a ton of stuff, but I had extra compact flash express cards in here. I brought my phone, which is just a standard Pixel 6, and then you may have noticed that this has a case on it. So this is a quad lock case that clipped onto my bike. For camera gear, here is that Z7 II. I have an L bracket on it, which was a little bit of a pain for packing purposes. And then I have the Z24-120 f4 lens on top of that. I brought a lens pen just for cleaning that lens. So this was very handy just to clean lenses. And I had dusted the sensor before I left, and I wasn't changing the lenses. So in theory, there shouldn't have been any dust on it. Filter-wise, I kept it pretty simple. So I brought a Stingray LB neutral polarizer. This was on my lens quite often during the day while I was riding. And then I brought a Stingray 3-stop reverse ND grad for sunrises and sunsets, and I only used this a couple of times on the trip just because I wasn't in ideal places for sunrise or sunset. And then I brought a soft grad as well, so this is a 3-stop soft, and it was the same situation as this other grad, just didn't use it all that much. Also brought a remote release for releasing the shutter. I brought a strap, so this is PD or PS Designs, and it's a strap specific for riding your bike. So it has the quick release tabs on the side that are just the Peak Design quick release tabs. So it's quick on and off. But the kind of nice thing about this is it had an additional clip to act as a third strap around your body. So it could be securely kept on my back without moving around, and it wasn't up front swaying around. In the end, I didn't actually use that once, so it was kind of a wasted thing to bring, but I thought I might want to ride with my camera. What I found out there, because I was riding 60 to 80 miles a day, I ended up finding that the photo opportunities were few and far between, so I didn't really need to have the camera on my back. If I did this trip solo, had I been riding with other people, I probably would have used this more often, because then I would have gotten more shots. So the tripod that I brought is the Shure AM225, which is a 2-pound tripod with their ball head. And it sets up to about chest level for me, just maybe a little bit under that, and it's extremely lightweight. The downside to this is you can notice the bottom part of the tripod leg, the very bottom section, is like a pencil thin. So it's not super stable. There's some compromises. Generally, I used it at about waist height, just using this next one up. Very seldom did I pull the pencil one out, but that's the problem with these really, really lightweight tripods, is they're all compromises. In retrospect, there's actually one that's 1 pound out there, and it would have worked just fine for my purposes, because I just didn't use this very often. I used it for a couple sunrises, a couple sunsets, and then I also used it just to film myself as I rode, which I didn't do very often. I did that less. Carried it all in a rugged design pack. So this was, I took my memory card holders in there, stuffed them in. I took these filters in there, stuffed those in. I took the round polarizer, I put that in when I wasn't using it. And then at first I had this filter holder. So this is just, they don't make this anymore, but it's an old one. And I had that in there as well, but it just was a pain to use. So I just carried this elsewhere on my bike. So for the rest of the gear, camera gear, I took my shutter release cord and I stuffed it in this bag. So this is a Revlet design bag that's designed to go on the front of the bike. And I'd never had the straps on my camera, so I'm just going to take those off. And then I took this and I stuffed this inside of this pack, and then this just sat on the front of my bike. It has a roll top closure and supposedly waterproof. I didn't have to test that on the trip. I never had much rain. I had a little bit of drizzle, but not enough that it was a downpour or anything. I also kept the peak or the lens pen right in this pack as well. So I stored this on my bike in a couple different places. So at first I had it on the outside of my seat pack. There's just like a Velcro strap that could fit on it. After Black Duck, I sent a few items home, and I had enough room to just stuff this inside the seat pack. And honestly, I just didn't use this stuff very much, so it just didn't come out. So in retrospect, I probably would have just brought the polarizer, and then that would have cut down on the space. This thing, this strap, I also had these Peak Design quick release plates on this bag, so I could use it as a shoulder strap, which I did use in a couple places. Like if I was going to go into a store, I would do it. So I always kept this clipped into this pack with the Peak Design, and then because I did that, it was quickly off and on the bike, and then I could just carry it around my shoulder as I went in grocery shopping, or if I was going on a hike or something, so that my camera was always with me. I kept my wallet in there as well, so that was handy to have that along. All the other electronics just packed up into this Dyneema bag, and I kept that in my top tube bag. So that is all of the electronics save one. The last piece of electronics that I had on me is this old InReach SE messenger. And what this does is it's an emergency messenger. So if I would have gotten in trouble, there's an SOS device, but this also allowed me to communicate with my wife if I was ever in any areas that didn't have cell service. And additionally, this sent every 10 minutes, it sent a location mark of where I was at on the route to a map that my wife and friends had access to. So they could always keep track of where I was at. So camera gear isn't the only art supplies that I brought along the trip. So I brought a small watercolor kit. So I had this portable painter watercolor kit, which was able to carry 8 different colors. And then I dabbed a couple extra colors up above in case I needed white or a different color blue. I just brought like a travel brush. And this thing's kind of cool because it just opens and closes. You can put that in. I brought a Uniball Air pen and then just a mechanical pencil with some lead in there. And this is a Sea to Summit shot glass, but it works great for water. You can just pop it out, so I could put water in there to paint with. To dry stuff up, I just brought a little microfiber cloth. And then inside here, this was the fun one. I brought a accordion style watercolor book. And then before I left, I actually put the route on there. And then as I was riding the route, I ended up painting in stuff and writing in my journal. So this became my journal as well as watercolor paints. It was a lot of work to do, but I think it was worthwhile. I'm very happy with how it turned out. And this is something that I'm going to treasure as a memory looking back at the trip in the future. So well worth doing, and it was worth the extra weight for sure. So the next category is like bike repair gear and some bike specific stuff that I haven't mentioned so far. So this is a rear flashing light, but not only is it a light, it's a radar, and that radar would send car location information to me on my navigation computer, and the navigation computer had the entire route programmed into it, so it would give me turn-by-turn directions, so I didn't have to think too much about that. There were a few places where it got a little tricky, so I had all the Minnesota DNR proposed maps with me as well, so that I could check those in case something was feeling a little sketch. I also had that information on my phone, so I could check that as well. As far as maintenance and repair gear, it's kind of standard. So this is like a standard first aid kit in here, and this also had camping repair materials like sewing equipment and that kind of stuff. I had oil with me in a dropper bottle and a rag. And I had some tire levers and a quick link repair kit. An extra tube, so I ride tubeless, so I wanted an extra tube along. Also had some tire boots along. I had an extra derailleur hanger in case I would have broke that. I had extra sealant, just a multi-tool with a chain brake on it, and all of the tools that I needed for my bike. I did bring a CO2 cartridge in case I would have needed that to potentially reseat my tires. I'm not sure it would have worked. I've never tried it, so that's why I also had the tube. And then I had these Dynaplugs Racer Pro kit that could plug holes in my tires. I never had to use it on the trip, but I have used this, and it makes it really quick to repair a tubeless tire. Valve core removal tool, an extra valve, and then some extra cleats for my shoes because I ride clipless. And then I had a bike light for the front as well. I didn't plan on riding at night, but I brought it anyways just in case I would have ran into that. The majority of this stuff was stored in this bag, if you can believe it or not. And then this bag was stored in my seat pack. Anything that couldn't fit, like the tire and the derailleur hanger, and then the stands, was in the seat pack, like just packed into the very front of the seat pack. It's very hard to utilize that space, so I ended up packing them there. Brought a lot of clothing, and I was glad to have it. We'll start with what I rode in, and then we'll work to the camp clothes. So the first item is a bike shorts. So these are by Rab, and I didn't have an opportunity to wash these on the trip very much. So every night I would take a wet wipe, wilderness wipe by Sea to Summit, and I would wipe it down as well as I could, and that kept the smell out and worked pretty well. In the end, these didn't work for me on a long trip. Although they work fine on day rides, I found that there's like this ridge in here, this abrupt ridge that was not very, not great for me over the long term. So I'll use these for day rides, but I won't use them for a long trip again. I rode with some merino wool, and these are Mary wool. So it's kind of a budget option that you can get. I had a short sleeve shirt and then a quarter zip long sleeve, and I loved these. These were absolutely great. I would wear those again. In fact, I hardly ever wanted to take these off. I wore them during the day, I slept with them at night. The only time I took them off is when I had opportunity to take a shower, which was just twice on the trip. And even then, because it was chilly out, I didn't want to take them off to get in the shower. So they were just so warm and nice. So additional riding gear were these Rab pants. So these are specific Rab for cycling, and these worked great. I would do them again. I also had this downpour jacket from Rab. I wore this a lot. I didn't have any rain on the trip, but I had some below freezing temperatures in the morning, and then it got up to 60 during the day at some points. Mainly it was in the 40s though, so I had this on a lot. It was comfortable, it was warm, it breathed well, it didn't flap in the wind, it was form-fitting, great jacket, love it. So additionally for riding, I had the Darn Tough socks. So these are just their lightweight hikers. They're for hiking, but I found them great for riding all summer. I rode these over 2,000 miles this year, and they still look great. I brought 2 pairs with me actually, but I only used this one on the bike, and they didn't really get stinky, which was great. So because it was so cold out, I was riding with these old windstopper gloves that I have, so Manzella. And these were beat up before going in, and now they're pretty beat up even more, so they're probably going to need to be replaced because they have holes all through them. But they kept my hands nice and warm on all the days except some of the coldest mornings. And then I had some Smart wool gloves that I was mainly brought for camp in case these would get wet. But I did ride with these on some mornings when it was below freezing. Had a ski hat from Swix. I think this is bamboo, and it just didn't keep its shape. I would not bring that again. That's going away. Indispensable for the trip was a buff. Absolutely loved this thing. Wore it every day. So some of the mornings that were very cold, I have this Alpha Direct Sensi design shirt. I think, or Senchi design shirt. This thing is weird because if you don't have anything over it, it kind of breathes really well and you can get cold when the wind blows, but you put this underneath a jacket and it's crazy warm. And it weighs like 5 ounces and it's snuggly. So I wore this on the coldest mornings while I was riding, but I usually would need to shed it right after it would get about 35 to 40 degrees. It was just too hot for those temperatures. And then the other thing that I did notice with this is if it was going to be cold at night, I would wear this into my sleeping bag, and that would keep me nice and snuggly. So the remaining clothes here are camp clothes, but before we get to that, I had these shoes. These are old Shimano shoes. I don't even know what they were. They fit great, still work well. Love them. And then I got a Bontrager helmet, which is their new, I don't know what they call it, wave cell. And it's supposed to protect your head better. It was comfortable, that's why I bought it. And then when it was sunny out, I had these sunglasses that you see stored up here. This was an effective way to store them, just on upside down on the helmet. But when it was sunny out, they're Tofazi, and they change darkness based on how bright it is outside. Loved them. Which brings us down to the camp gear. I wore the merino wool in camp. These were my camp socks. So after I'd go to bed, I'd bring those with me. I had some outdoor research boxers. These are just 2 ounces. And then I had some Terramar long underwear for sleeping in. I also brought this pair of pants from Montbell. So these are supposed to be rain pants, but they're extremely light. They're just like 3 ounces, 2 or 3 ounces, I can't quite remember, but they're extremely light. So I wanted a pair of pants for camp so I wouldn't have to sit around in the Rab rain gear, especially if it got wet during the day. And these worked great. I just wish they were a little bit more breathable because that would have been nicer. They didn't breathe as well as I wanted when I was sitting down on them. So I brought a camp towel just for taking a shower. I used it twice. And then one of the gear that I really debated on not bringing was a full down jacket. I was going to just bring a vest, but I'm glad I brought this. So this is a Rab down jacket. I forget the name of it, but it's like 850, 900 fill down. It is so warm. I was happy to have it. It's a little bit heavier than some down jackets that are in competition with it, but I think it's actually warmer. I don't know if there's extra down in there or if this is a little bit more windproof or something, but this is an extremely warm down jacket. I wore this all the time when I would get into camp. It was one of the first things that I would put on when I was setting up camp. And then on the nights that got extremely cold, I did wear this down jacket to bed, mainly because my quilt just isn't as warm as advertised. So I loved it, glad I had that one. All right, and that brings us to cooking gear and camping gear. So I brought a Vargo 700 milliliter pot, MSR Pocket Rocket 2 Deluxe with the piezo ignition, Hilltop Pack long-handled titanium spoon, 2 canisters of jet boil, which was a good thing that I did. I went through one, and on the last morning, halfway through cooking breakfast, I ran out and had to start a second one. There's a reason for that. I'll mention it. I brought a cloth to store in the pot, bear bag from Hilltop's back with some of their line. And then one of the cool things in here that they offer is this line winder for bear bags. And I would definitely get this again because it made getting the line off and on very, very quick and less messy than just stuffing it into a bag. And then I had the Hilltop's Pack bear bag, and I did bag every night and I hung every night except on the western side where there's fewer bears. But every time that I got into the after the second night, so the third night on, I bear bagged every night. And then I just have kind of my like toothbrush and stuff in this Dyneema bag. So if you look in here, I actually brought deodorant because I don't normally, but I was going to be in town. Toothbrush, chapstick, toothpaste tabs, a little bit of Dr. Bronner soap in there, some medication, and that was all inside of a Dyneema bag. So one of the nice things about this Vargo kit is that I was able to store everything inside of it. So if we just take that Pocket Rocket Deluxe and we'll unscrew it, I can put this canister in there and then collapse the Pocket Rocket Deluxe. It's kind of like a little bit of a puzzle to figure out how it all fits. And then I'll wrap it in here so it doesn't rattle on the bike so much. And then I'm able to put the top on it and store it all within the inside of this pot. So everything fits in there very nicely. All right, as far as the camping gear itself, I brought a Cineform from Yama Mountain Gear, and I used their tent poles as well. So this is a modified tarp that has the extra protection. And then there were some poles. I used their stake bag, and then inside there's a combination of Groundhog 8-inchers and Groundhog mini stakes from MSR. The other thing that I brought is a custom-made bivvy from Bora Gear, and this was just like a bivvy with a little bit of bug netting on it. I brought a Nemo Tensor sleeping pad, and I actually brought it in its bag. And I brought a Nemo Philo sleeping pillow, which was really nice, inflatable pillow. To inflate the Tensor, I brought Nemo's inflation bag. I was actually testing another product at the time. It just, the first unit I had was a prototype beta model, and it just didn't work right. So I left it at home. I have got a production model now, and it's much, much better. So they must have fixed it or something. Something was wrong with it. And then the last thing I had was a Enlightened Equipment Revelation 20-degree sleeping bag. And I don't know what world this is a 20-degree bag, because it is not. Anytime it gets down to 30, I freeze in this thing. And yeah, so, but you know, 20 degrees. And that was the sleeping bag. I'm not gonna set all this stuff up here. I'm just gonna flash a picture at some point of it all set up that I took on the trip, just because it's a little bit of work to set all of that up. But that's basically all of the camping gear. A few other last things to show. So just a few last things that I brought with me. It was a bike lock. I don't even know the brand, but it's a combination lock, auto lock. This was more for my peace of mind. I don't think it would have lasted very long out in the field. I did use it a few times and it made me feel better. And then I brought a Platypus, a water filter, and I love this thing. It worked great. And then the Platypus bag. Additionally, I brought a couple of 22-ounce water bottles, and these were just standard bike bottles, and I brought a 32-ounce bike bottle that I actually lost on a rough ATV trail. It just flew off, and I heard something, I looked back, I didn't see anything, and about 3-4 miles later, I realized my water bottle was gone, and I wasn't gonna go back and get it, so I just bought a water bottle at a gas station and used that for the rest of the trip. And that is all the gear that I brought with me. And let's see if we can fit it into the bike. All right, so here's all the stuff laid out in front of me, all the gear. Normally I would put all of my food into here. I don't have any food with me, so I put my tripod in there just because it's easier to deal with. And then I would actually pack my bear bag separately from the food just because it didn't fit as well in there. Packed full of food, toilet paper, and my toiletries would also go into the main pocket of this Rogue Panda custom-made frame bag. So then electronics and my spare pump just went up in this front pocket. That's a Rogue Panda top tube bag, and that's where I would keep my headphones as well. I didn't ride with the headphones a lot, but it was nice to have them when I wanted them. So this is the bag that is by Revlet Designs for their pronghorn system, and I didn't bring the pronghorn harness. I actually brought their other harness because it was a little beefier. I don't know, I could probably got away with the pronghorn. So here's the Cineform that would go into here first, and then I would put my tensor in, my sleeping pad in this one. I would take the Bora Bivy gear next and just stuff that in there to fill some space between those items. The poles for this would go in to here as well. And then the stakes. So basically my whole shelter system is going in to that spot. And also would take the pillow and just stuff the pillow in there. Some days I would stuff it into a stuff sack and other days I wouldn't. It just depends how I was feeling. I would take my stove and put it in there, and then the spare canister, and then the pump bag would also go into this. And the only other thing that I kept in here was my down jacket. So I generally didn't ride with the down jacket, so I just stuffed it in here. And then once that was in, just compress it, and that would go on the front of my bike. So the back of the bike, the first thing I would start with are my long underwear and socks. So I would just put that all the way in, and then the next thing was this quilt. And this is a waterproof bag by Arkle. So it wasn't, and I've tested this actually in the rain on other trips, and it's waterproof, so you can just stuff it in and not have to worry about it. Then I would put my camp pants, and if I wasn't wearing the Alpha Direct Polartec Alpha, then I would stuff that in there as well. I would take that camera bag for the filters and then stuff that in last. If I was riding with Pop-Tarts or something, I would also put them into the back here and keep those from getting squished in the main triangle. So I still have quite a bit of space on the inside of that Arkle. So let's see, we got the riding clothes here. We don't have to fit. Whoops, I left a few things out of there that I normally would put in first, which was the sealant and the tube. I'm not going to repack that. So the tools would go right here in, there's a pocket up here. I don't know that the new ones have this pocket, but it was perfect for carrying the tools. So they just fit into there snugly, but about perfectly, and then allowed quick access to the tools. And I didn't really have to use them, so luckily I had no major problems. My oil, which I used a few times, just a dropper bottle. Pack that into the side bag over on the other side. And then that's also where I kept my watercolor kit, was in this part of the bike. So the towel, when it was wet, I would just put it under the bungee here, which was also handy for Pringles. Glasses case, kept that over in a handlebar bag on that side. My first aid kit. I did have to use it a few times just for some Advil and a Band-Aid. No major injuries though, that just goes onto the other side. Bike light would go into the handlebar bag on the right hand side. See, this is all riding clothes. Riding clothes. So if I wasn't wearing my hat or my gloves, they would just go over here into this bag, this handlebar bag. And that's where my buff would also go, which I'm not seeing. And then generally I was riding with this coat. If I wasn't, I could put it two places. I would just take it and put it underneath the bungee cord on the back of the bike, or if I wanted like easier access to it, I would just put it right up front underneath a strap. The pants, when I was riding them, of course I was riding in them, but if I wasn't riding them, I would just take them off, just fold them up, and then I would stuff them into the seat pack. The final things on the bike here were the bike lock. I like to have this handy, so I just put that over in that front handlebar bag, and that's where I kept the water filter as well. So we just roll it up and stuff that in there. It was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle getting it all right, but after you do it a few days, you got all of that down. So there is another handlebar bag on the front of my bike. That's where I would keep snacks. And then this thing just would strap up underneath there like they normally do. So yeah. All right, so what worked and what didn't on this trip? I'll start with camera gear. I think for the most part, my camera system worked well. It accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I would have taken a lighter tripod just because I didn't use it, and I probably wouldn't have brought any of the filters or filter holder. I would have just brought the polarizer because that's how I shot this trip. So other than that, it was good. Since then, I've purchased a Nikon ZF, and I love the autofocus system. I'm filming on it right now, and I would have brought that instead, just because it's It's a little bit smaller of a camera, and I like the autofocus system better than the Z7 II. I also have a Z8, but that I thought was just a little too big for this trip. For the stove and my cooking gear, I've used that same system on solo trips for many years now. I absolutely love it. I did have one problem with it this year. I think because it was rattling around so much inside the bike, the stove was, that the screen on top actually popped off. And I was able to repair it. That's the nice thing about MSR's gear, is you can field maintain them. So I repaired it in the field. But when I was showing it, just before I showed it in this video, it actually popped off again. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit more repair. The one thing that I wish I would have brought with me was an additional mug for coffee. So in the mornings I would cook oatmeal and have coffee, and I would have to fire up the stove twice to boil water for the oatmeal and to boil water for the coffee. And that ended up being an inefficient use of fuel, and it's the reason why I ran out of fuel on that last morning. So I should have brought something like this C7 coffee mug, or this lighter mug that was off of a thermos. And these would have been a better choice for me. What I think is missing on the market is a titanium double-walled coffee mug with a non-spill lid on the top. It just doesn't exist. I wish Vargo or somebody would make something like that and make it about 3 ounces, because it would have been great to be able to ride with my coffee. So another thing that didn't work for me on this trip is the quilt. And to be honest with you, I've used quilts for many years and I've always liked them. This time I found it extremely fussy to use for some reason. And you know, in order to get it around your neck, there's a button here that you have to put behind you and clip while you're sitting down on the ground. It's just, to try to stay warm in a quilt, it's just a pain. And honestly, I'm over quilts. So this will be the last trip that I use a quilt on. If you have a recommendation for a good 20-degree sleeping bag that weighs under 2 pounds, let me know in the comments, because I need something else. Done with that. So this was the first trip that I used this Yama Mountain Gear Cineform on, and it worked okay. I think I bought the lower poles, which made the roof height very, very low and uncomfortable to be in at night, because it would get dark at 5 o'clock, because I did this trip in October. I spent a lot of time inside of the tarp, and it just wasn't very comfortable to use on the inside. So the jury's still out on this thing. I might get the bigger poles, but for a bike trip, I wouldn't bring it again. I would just bring my Big Agnes Tiger Wall UL2. It's not that much heavier, and it gives you a lot more usable space, and it would have been a lot more comfortable for the amount of time that I was spending inside of a tent. This actually worked great. My pillow, love it. And then my Nemo tensor, love it. The Bora Gear bivy. I had problems with this. And it wasn't that it wasn't comfortable. It worked all well for that. But the first night that I used it on the trail, my first night on the trail, it got below freezing. And I woke up, and between my sleeping bag and the bivy was a layer of ice all the way down to my feet, like just this thin layer of ice. So I had to wait for the sun to rise up to thaw out my sleeping bag, because I didn't want to pack it away with all that ice caked on it. I thought maybe that was a one-off weirdness, and so then I used it again. I didn't use it for a night, I used it on another night, and I woke up and it was just condensation between the layers of the bivy and on top of my sleeping bag. And then I didn't use it for the rest of the trip, except for one of the nights I knew it was going to get well below freezing into the lower 20s Fahrenheit. So I wanted to get as much as warmth as I could. So I got in that, and it actually worked in that situation. So I corresponded with the owner of the company, and they say, like, potentially in those like temperatures around freezing on moist nights, they've experienced that as well. So maybe not for that kind of situation. Another thing that worked well was the pump bag, actually, the Nemo pump bag. So I've been using electronic pumps for years, and I went back to pumping it up with a bag, and you know what? It wasn't that hard. Like 3 or 4 full bags worth in less than a minute, it was full. Another thing that I loved on the trip was the Hilltop Packs bear bag, their spoon, and their line winder and line and throw bag. Works great. Just get it if you don't have one. So my very favorite thing from the trip is my bike. It's a Rocky Mountain Solo C50, which is a carbon fiber version of their gravel bike, and it fits me perfectly. It carried all the gear I needed to carry. It was fast, it was comfortable, it was light. I can't say enough good things about it. All right, so there are a few pieces of gear that I did send home that I started with. So I had this Rogue Panda bag that goes underneath the seat on top of the top tube. I found that it was just rubbing the inside of my thigh, which it didn't do on my old bike, but it did on this one. So I ended up sending that one home at Black Duck, which was the halfway point. There were a couple extra stuff sacks that I sent home there. This light load tall, a couple pamphlets that I picked up at state parks. I thought I was going to wear a baseball cap in camp, and it turned out that I just had my stocking cap on the whole time, so that went home. And then I brought an extra shirt for camp. So this is a Patagonia Nails Trail shirt, which is a mountain biking shirt. And I thought I would wear this in camp, but I just found that I wanted the wool stuff all the time, so that went home too. So I did send this stuff home, which saved me about £1, which was really nice. Yeah. And that is pretty much it. So that's my bike touring and what I used, all the gear that I used on the border-to-border route, and had a lot of fun. It's a great route, and I hope you found this video entertaining. Thanks for shooting with me today. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and we'll see you next time.